Jackie Robinson. On April 15, 1947, Jackie Robinson, 1919 to 1972, became the first African American to play in the Major League Baseball League. On that day, he started for the Brooklyn Dodgers. The so-called color line had existed in baseball and many other sports for decades in American sports, the complete segregation of whites and blacks into separate leagues and teams. There had been blacks in the sport of baseball for many years. In fact, in the 19th century, blacks had played alongside white players in several leagues in the U.S. However, an 1896 court case reinforced the segregation of baseball players according to the color of their skin. As a result, black players were excluded from Major League Baseball, relegated either to the position of mascot for the Major League team or forced to organize their own loosely structured Negro teams. Robinson, the son of a sharecropper and grandson of a slave, excelled in several sports before serving in the U.S. Army. Initially a player in the Negro Leagues, Robinson played in a period when there was increasing support for breaking down the color barrier. The Brooklyn Dodgers manager took on Robinson mainly because Robinson was a solid player, not because he was interested in challenging the color barrier. Also, he felt it would increase attendance at the Brooklyn games, especially of African American fans. In 1946, Robinson went to Florida to play for the Montreal Royals, the Dodgers farm team. This move was risky on Robinson's part, as racism was still rampant in the U.S., especially in the South. In Florida, there were segregation laws that prohibited blacks and whites from sharing the same restaurants, hotels, and other public places, including the baseball field. Robinson was forced to stay in a coloreds-only hotel. It was believed that there would be a greater chance of Robinson being integrated into the minor league in the more liberal and open environment of Canada. Eventually, Robinson played his way into the Major League. However, the transition was not a smooth one. In the first year, he had many pitches thrown his way and was regularly taunted by fans and players. However, his season was a successful one, and he was voted Rookie of the Year. Robinson's Major League career lasted 10 years. Despite his initial success in breaking the color line in baseball, it would take many decades before there would be complete acceptance of black players. To this day, there is underrepresentation of blacks in management and coaching positions in baseball. Robinson died in 1972. His headstone bears an epitaph that he wrote, "A life is not important except in the impact that it has on other lives." Title IV. In 1972, the United States Congress passed Title IV of the Educational Amendments. This instituted a law that would seriously affect all U.S. educational institutions' sports programs. The law specified that it was unlawful to discriminate on the basis of sex in any federally funded educational program. This meant, among other things, that boys and girls and men's and women's sports programs would have to receive equal funding and support under the new law. The law was passed in a time when feminist-inspired movements in many countries around the world were fighting for equality for women. While Title IV was a law directed at equality in education in general, it is sports programs that received the most attention. This was perhaps because of the visibility of sports and the prominent place they play, especially in American post-secondary education. Initially, Title IV met with mixed reviews. Especially vocal in opposition to the law were those who had a lot invested in men's sports programs in the bigger educational institutions. Also, those that had administered male sports programs for years felt that the changes necessary to conform to Title IV's standards would be difficult and expensive. In the aftermath of Title IV, a battle emerged between the National Collegiate Athletic Association, NCAA, and a group that had administered women's sports, the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Girls and Women, or AIAW. The NCAA had avoided equalization for years, being devoted almost exclusively to men's sport. In fact, it was in opposition to the NCAA that the AIAW formed in the first place. However, with federal funding now legally devoted to equalization, the NCAA made an about turn and suddenly supported equalization. In what many consider to be an obvious and unfortunate power move, the NCAA absorbed the AIAW. The long-term effects of this move were to wrestle control of women's sport out of the hands of women. The AIAW was administered by women for women. However, with the takeover, the administration of women's sport fell into the hands of men. Title IV did not manage to equalize funding between the sexes, at least not at first. The legislators of Title IV probably couldn't imagine the resistance to equalization in sport that would emerge, nor did they probably realize the extent of male privilege in school sport, especially at the upper, more elite levels. Almost 30 years after the legislation, there is still not equalization in many cases, although an increasing number of schools have fallen in line with the law. Today, women's sport has achieved a much higher level of respectability and support in schools. However, there is still resistance to complete equalization, and female supportive administrators continue to fight legal battles in support of girls' and women's participation in sport. O.J. Simpson. It has been argued that the trial of Orenthal James O.J. Simpson for murder was the defining cultural experience of the U.S. in the 1990s. It dominated the front pages of newspapers in the U.S. and many other countries for several months. Indeed, Simpson was for a period of time probably the most talked about person in the world, but very few of the discussions were about his athletic career. Until his internationally famous trial, Simpson was a relative unknown outside the U.S. A very wealthy and highly decorated former professional football player, Simpson made the transition to acting and television commentating after his illustrious football career. However, when he was charged in June of 1994 with the murder of his estranged wife Nicole Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman, and after his dramatic suicide getaway attempt captured by television cameras, Simpson became known throughout the world almost overnight. Simpson was born in San Francisco in 1947 to a poor family. His father abandoned the family, and it was his mother who encouraged Simpson to pursue sport, mainly to compensate for some physical problems he had developed as a child. Simpson became a solid baseball and football player early in his life and went on to enroll in the City College of San Francisco, where he continued to play impressive football. With offers from over 50 other universities to play football, Simpson went to the University of Southern California. There, he played out a distinguished college career and earned himself the 1968 Heisman Trophy for top college player in the U.S. Simpson began his professional career by dropping out of school before graduation and immediately signed a 3-year endorsement deal with Chevrolet for $250,000. Drafted by the Buffalo Bills in 1969, the first few years of Simpson's professional career were undistinguished ones. However, from 1972 on, a new coach for the team made Simpson the central figure in the team's offense. As a result, Simpson would go on to shatter several running records in the National Football League. At the conclusion of his career, Simpson was inducted into the Professional Football Players Hall of Fame. After his professional football career, stories about Simpson's alleged abuse of his wife began circulating. Nicole Simpson made the first call to police after an incident at a 1989 New Year's Eve party in which Simpson was fined $200. Over the next few years, Nicole would make 30 emergency calls to police, none of which led to formal charges. After the incidents surrounding Nicole's death and Simpson's subsequent flight from police, an exhaustive months-long trial ensued, leading to Simpson's famous acquittal. More than just a murder trial, however, O.J. Simpson's trial highlighted the racial tensions in the U.S. In fact, history will undoubtedly remember Simpson more for his trial than for his illustrious football career. Fosbury flop. American athlete Dick Fosbury devised the high jump technique known as the Fosbury flop. His new technique revolutionized one of the oldest events in track and field competition. While Fosbury never broke the world record using his new technique, other high jumpers were inspired by his gold medal at the 1968 Summer Olympic Games in Mexico City, where he introduced his new jumping technique. Fosbury was born in 1946 in Oregon and went to Oregon State University. He won the gold medal in the Olympic Games at the very young age of 21. It was assumed that his odd-looking new method for clearing the bar was based on a careful study of the physics and biomechanics of high jump technique. However, Fosbury claimed it was the product of pure intuition. Prior to Fosbury's invention, most high jumpers used a straddle technique. In this older style of jumping, the front leg led the jumper up and over the bar in a face-down position. Fosbury's technique involves approaching the bar in a curve with a last-second acceleration. Then, at the point of takeoff, the body rotates, positioning the back to the bar and leaping backwards. The head faces the sky as the body arches over the bar, with the mid-body and legs trailing behind. Fosbury had begun experimenting with the new technique when he was only 16 years old. In a meet in 1968 in which Fosbury used the new technique, a local newspaper's headline read, "Fosbury flops over the bar." Thus, the name of the newly invented technique was born. Since Fosbury's competitive days, his technique has been widely copied. Once experienced jumpers mastered the technique, records started to fall in the sport, due mostly to the Fosbury flop, but also to better equipment and running surfaces. Dick Fosbury will always be known for his revolutionizing of the sport of high jump.